Let's listen.
They know I have always fought for what is right. My advocacy has always been grounded in what I learned from growing up as a son of Cuban refugees, especially my mom, my hero, Evangelina Menendez. Everything I've accomplished, I've worked for, despite the naysayers and everyone who has underestimated me. I recognize this will be the biggest fight yet, but as I have stated throughout this whole process, I firmly believe that when all the facts are presented, not only will I be exonerated, but I still will be the New Jersey's senior senator. For now, I want to address four things. First, a cornerstone of the foundation of American democracy and our justice system is the principle that all people are presumed innocent until proven guilty. All people. I ask for nothing more and deserve nothing less. The court of public opinion is no substitute for our revered justice system. We cannot set aside the presumption of innocence for political expediency when the harm is irrevocable. To those who have rushed to judgment, you have done so based on a limited set of facts framed by the prosecution to be as salacious as possible. Remember, prosecutors get it wrong sometimes. Sadly, I know that. Instead of waiting for all the facts to be presented, others have rushed to judgment because they see a political opportunity for themselves or those around them. All I humbly ask for in this moment, in my colleagues in Congress, the elected leaders and the advocates of New Jersey that I have worked with for years, as well as each person who calls New Jersey home, is to pause and allow for all the facts to be presented. Second, my long record on Egypt. One fact is indisputable. Throughout my time in Congress, I have remained steadfast on the side of civil society and human rights defenders in Egypt and everywhere else in the world. If you look at my actions related to Egypt during the period described in this indictment and throughout my whole career, my record is clear and consistent in holding Egypt accountable for its unjust detention of American citizens and others, its human rights abuses, its deepening relationship with Russia, and efforts that have eroded the independence of the nation's judiciary, among a myriad of concerns. In 2017, I led a bipartisan letter to then-President Trump expressing grave concern with the worsening situation for human rights and civil society in Egypt. That same year, I sent a letter to the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee supporting U.S. assistance to Egypt as long as Egypt adhered to the Camp David Accords and urged the Appropriations Committee to include the requirements for assistance reform strategies outlined in the Egypt Assistance Reform Act of 2013. In 2018, I urged Secretary Tillerson to focus more on human rights issues in Egypt and raise concerns that the electoral environment ahead of Egypt's elections at the time was not free, fair, and credible. In 2019, I met with President el-Sisi at the Munich Security Conference and emphasized the level of repression inside of Egypt, risking eroding our security cooperation and raising concerns about Egypt's intent to purchase a Russian missile system. In 2020, I spoke on the Senate floor for International Women's Day and cited the cases of Marinor El-Masri, a human rights lawyer, and Ezra Abdel Fattah, a human rights activist and reporter who were unjustly detained in Egypt for fighting for human rights, democracy, and a free press. I have placed holds on foreign military sales funding to Egypt, and in the presence of other United States senators, I have challenged President Sisi directly on human rights abuses, arbitrary detention, and press freedoms. And the list goes on. Throughout my 30 years in the House of Representatives and the Senate, I have always worked to hold accountable those countries, including Egypt, for human rights abuses, the repression of its citizenry, civil society, and more. Those who now are attempting to malign my actions as it relates to Egypt simply don't know the facts. Third, for 30 years, I have withdrawn thousands of dollars in cash from my personal savings account. which I have kept for emergencies and because of the history of my family facing confiscation in Cuba. Now, this may seem old-fashioned, but these were monies drawn from my personal savings account based on the income that I have lawfully derived over those 30 years. I look forward to addressing other issues at trial. 4, I want to speak directly to the people of New Jersey. As I started these remarks, you're the reason why I have dedicated the entirety of my adult life to improving the lives of hardworking New Jerseyans and all Americans. Some of the people calling for my resignation for political reasons say I have lost the trust of the people of New Jersey. That couldn't be more wrong. Today I'm surrounded by everyday people and constituents who know me. They are here because I fought for important health care policies like the Affordable Care Act, access to reproductive health care, funding for community health centers, and lowering the cost of prescription drugs. They are here because I have fought for working people, those who work 5 to 9, to support those working from 9 to 5. I've always advocated for the right of workers to organize for better wages and working conditions, and have been a staunch supporter of delivering critical services like affordable child care to better support working families. They are here because when New Jersey was in the darkest days following Superstorm Sandy, I never relented in making sure that New Jerseyans were made whole and had the resources to rebuild stronger and more resilient than before. They are here because during the worst pandemic in a century, I went to bat for small business owners throughout the state to ensure they could keep their doors open and their employees on the payroll. They are here because when state and local governments were faced with excruciating decision of having to lay off frontline responders, police officers, and firefighters during the pandemic, I delivered billions in federal funding and investments to keep our state, cities, and towns and hospitals afloat. They are here because throughout my career, and some may not have liked the positions I've taken, I have stood against authoritarian regimes in Iran and its desire to achieve nuclear weapons, or Cuba and its dictatorship, or authoritarianism in Turkey, Venezuela, Russia, and wherever in the world where human rights and democracy have been threatened. And they are here because I have made it my life's work about protecting refugees and immigrants who come to our shores seeking a better future for their children, just as my family did. They are here because during the past 30 years, I have fought tooth and nail so New Jersey would receive critical infrastructure funding and fought against the forces that tried to dismantle the Gateway Project. They are here because since my earliest days in Congress, I have repeatedly stood up to the gun lobby to stop illegal firearms from claiming too many lives and destroying communities. They are here because when tragedy struck one of New Jersey's federal judges, I made a promise that I would not stop until I passed a law to better protect the dedicated public servants in the judiciary. And last year, I delivered passing legislation signed into law by the President that will better protect judges and their families. And they are here because I never gave up on delivering justice for 9/11 families, especially the widows and children of those killed who were previously and unfairly excluded from the U.S. victims of state-sponsored terrorism. And in December, working with others, I delivered billions of dollars in long overdue federal relief to that community and other U.S. victims of terror. They are here because when other members of Congress wanted to turn their backs on our veterans and not pass the PACT Act to provide health care for our veterans who were exposed to toxic burn pits, I was there. And they are here because I successfully passed legislation to better serve World War II vets as well as those suffering from Gulf War illnesses. For now, I remain focused on continuing to do the important work I do every day on behalf of the 9 million people who call New Jersey home, including doing everything we can this week to avoid a government shutdown, deliver critical funding for states affected by catastrophic natural disasters, and ensure the people of Ukraine have everything they need to defeat Putin. And I'll return to Washington this week to do exactly that. Now, let me just say a few words in Spanish. Buenos días. Gracias a todos los que están aquí, especialmente los residentes de New Jersey que me acompañan hoy mientras realizo comentarios sobre los eventos de los últimos días. El viernes, el Distrito Sur de Nueva York presentó cargos en mi contra. Entiendo que estos cargos son serios, pero las alegaciones presentadas en contra de mí son eso solamente, alegaciones. Cualquier persona que me ha conocido a lo largo de mis 50 años de servicio público sabe que siempre he luchado por lo que es justo. Mi trabajo siempre se ha centrado en lo que aprendí en crecer como hijo de refugiados cubanos, especialmente de mi madre, mi heroína Evangelina. He trabajado para alcanzar todos mis logros, a pesar de los detractores y todos los que me han subestimado. Reconozco la gravedad de este momento y que este será mi mayor batalla hasta hoy en día. Pero como he dicho a lo largo de todo este proceso...
You've been listening to Senator Bob Menendez, now in Spanish, speak for the first time since being indicted on federal bribery charges. The New Jersey Democrat says he firmly believes that when all facts come to light, he will be exonerated and he will continue to be a senator representing the people of New Jersey. He said people who have rushed to judgment have done so for political opportunities and that his record is clear and consistent. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland joins us now. Scott, we heard a lot of statements, and Senator Menendez says, I'm going to stay in my place. I hope to remain a senator. He's not stepping down. He says he plans to be exonerated. But there was a lot of messaging in between the lines. He said, sadly, I know that, when he mentioned that prosecutors are often wrong. I'm guessing he means because of his 2015 case that ended up in a mistrial. Talk to us about, what did you read in those messages? He's doubling, tripling down perhaps on his innocence.
With a level of cautiousness that comes from reading a pre-written statement, choosing his words strategically before he showed up today. He did say, I'll be exonerated. He did say those who say I've lost the faith of the people of New Jersey are wrong, and that he's receiving the pressure of a politicized prosecution. The complication for the senator, one of the many, is that those who are calling for him to resign include some of his closest allies. It's other Democrats in Congress, other Democrats from New Jersey, the people with whom he serves in the congressional delegation and has served for quite some time. It's New Jersey's governor, Phil Murphy, who would appoint the replacement, the successor, if Menendez were to resign. It's not just the opposing party here. The voices of criticism are coming from inside his party. The other complications, in addition to the federal bribery and conspiracy charges, is that he's got a calendar issue. He says he's back in Washington this week during a sensitive moment in which the government faces a shutdown. He's also got to be in New York this week for an initial appearance in this criminal case with his 4 co-defendants, his wife Nadine, and those 3 businessmen from New Jersey. Everything's getting mashed together, the politics and the prosecutions, which reminds us of so many other stories going on here in Washington where prosecutions and politics have been mashed together.
That's right, Scott. And, part of what he addressed there, it seemed to me a bit of a defense, and we get a little bit of a hint of where his defense is headed when he talks about his efforts in holding Egypt accountable. Would you mind just taking us back a little bit into the facts of the case as the prosecution is putting them forward?
Yeah, he made some broad references. So let's go back through what this indictment says. This provocative indictment, which alleges that he traded official favors as the chairman of the powerful Senate Foreign Affairs Committee in exchange for possible enriches. That it would include gold bars. You saw the images in the indictment. Stacks of cash, the feds say they found in his home, including inside a windbreaker with his name on it. A Mercedes convertible, which the prosecutors say was given to his wife and him in exchange for favors politically. What they also say is that some of the confidential information that Menendez is accused of sharing made its way to Egyptian officials, including security-sensitive information from the U.S. Embassy in Cairo. So what Menendez was doing was articulating his efforts in U.S. interests against Egypt. Clearly a reference to the case or to the charges or to the allegations in some way, shape, or form. He also said that he tends to withdraw a lot of cash from his savings account, saying it's old-fashioned, but he thought it was judicious. A passing reference potentially to the stacks of cash which were shown photographically in the indictment. Not a direct response to these allegations, but he clearly peppered his remarks with some explanation for some of these allegations.
A bit of a defense there. And when this news came out, I think a lot of people thought, well, if the Justice Department, as many Republicans are arguing, is so biased to prosecute former President Donald Trump, how come they're going after such a high-level Democrat? What are you hearing from Republicans? How have they been reacting to this?
Well, Republicans ultimately have been the least vocal with their calls for Menendez to resign. Yes, it's happened. We haven't heard it in the U.S. Senate, and you haven't heard it as demonstratively as you've heard from Democrats. It is an inconvenient moment for the Republican argument that this is a weaponized Department of Justice that is targeting Republicans exclusively, because Bob Menendez isn't just a Democrat. He's one of the most powerful Democrats in the U.S. Senate. He chairs a uniquely powerful committee. He has been here for quite some time. He's been a force in this party. He has a son serving in Congress. The real vibrant calls for him to resign, the ones that have resonated and that he seems to be addressing today, are those coming from his fellow Democrats, including from the Democrats in New Jersey, one of whom, Lilia, Congressman Andy Kim, not only said Menendez should resign, Kim says he's going to run for the seat in 2024. A reminder that Bob Menendez is up for re-election next year. He now has a primary opponent inside his own congressional delegation.
That's right. I mean, Andy Kim already said that he will be running. Scott, what does his re-election bid look like, technically speaking?
Well, any incumbent in the U.S. Senate would go in as a prohibitive favorite, certainly in a primary and often in a general election, especially in a traditionally blue state like New Jersey. This obviously complicates things. If he proceeds with his general election campaign, you better believe Republicans are going to put more time, money, and candidate equity into running against him in New Jersey, or against somebody who beats Menendez in a primary, somebody who's not an incumbent. It puts the race on the map at a time when Democrats simply do not need that. They have a uniquely challenging map in 2024 to try to hold on to that very narrow Senate majority. There are some very red states that Democrats are defending: West Virginia, Montana, Ohio. This may make New Jersey a battleground state. That's the last thing his party needs in a year that's already an obstacle for them.
And speaking of obstacles, I mean, Scott, you kind of referenced there something of this nature, but how does this play into a looming government shutdown? I mean, is this a distraction? Is this helpful for some in Congress to have conversations and negotiations that need to be happening? Is this an obstruction? Talk to me about, how this all plays out as we wait to see what's going to happen with the budget.
It's a really good question, because 6 days till this deadline for a government shutdown, any small variable can be a problem. Any small change or absence can be a problem with negotiations that are tenuous, if they're existent at all. His absence is going to be at least partial this week. He can't be here Wednesday when he's in court in New York. Can he sustain being here in Washington every day during this coming week with all this scrutiny? He says he will. Let's see if he is. But any absence is pivotal here. And Bob Menendez would need to be here for the Democrats to pass things through by narrow margins. But that's also one of the other complications that's worth mentioning. We just didn't hear many Senate Democrats saying Bob Menendez should resign. We heard from one, John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. There's something to read into that silence, or that more muted criticism, that ultimately senators are less inclined to call for each other's heads, and that they should be resigning or quitting. They're just less inclined to do that than other political bodies. But also, nobody can ignore the narrowness of the margins here right now, where any absence is pivotal. We have seen the same thing in the U.S. House with Congressman George Santos, also facing federal prosecution, also in New York City, also trying to serve in a narrow majority at the same time. There have been calls for him to resign, but not universal.
And also somebody who's been weighing in on this case. So, Scott, talk to us about that. Just, I'm curious, from the Democrats who have come out to say that he needs to resign, people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez yesterday on Face the Nation, what is it that they are seeking, or what is their logic compared to the senators who are staying more quiet?
That it's a distraction, that these allegations are so profound and distinctive that you can't serve while trying to battle them in court. And that's been a thread that you've seen in these calls for him to resign, that you can't do both. You can't defend yourself against this case and serve as a U.S. senator on powerful committees. But that's also the key of what I took away from Senator Menendez's remarks. He says those who say I've lost the trust or the ability to serve the people of New Jersey are wrong. It may be premature for either side to know that, whether he's lost the trust or whether he hasn't lost the trust. That's what we're going to find out over the next 48 to 72 hours, if not over the next couple of weeks. Can he sustain this? Is there enough support among the constituents of New Jersey for him to remain in place, facing allegations of bribery and conspiracy, of not just doing it while in office, but he's accused of leveraging his position to enrich himself? He's chairman of a powerful committee. They say he used that chairmanship to enrich himself. He's temporarily stood aside as chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. That's a Senate Democrats' rule. You have to if you're charged with a felony. There's no rule you have to step down from your seat. And as you're seeing today at this news availability from Senator Menendez, he's not standing down, and apparently he's not taking questions.
He's not taking questions. We were waiting for him to finish his statements in Spanish, which is something that, along with what he said about why he withdraws cash, being the son of Cuban refugees, he kind of laid out a whole logic around, being the son of refugees, speaking in Spanish. Yesterday, he said it's not a surprise that they're going so quickly to call a Latina to step down. Talk to us about what you've heard when he uses all of that to say, look, they're targeting me because of my heritage. And also at the same time, part of the defense is I don't have the same background as everybody else. There's a reason why I withdraw cash. And of course, reminding people that, hey, I speak Spanish and I'm speaking to the people in New Jersey who are native Spanish speakers, for instance.
Yeah, no response yet to our inquiries from the Congressional Hispanic Caucus about what Senator Menendez has been saying. But ultimately, Lilia, this is going to be up to the constituencies of New Jersey. Can he sustain this? Can he sustain being a popularly elected official in New Jersey? His constituents will be vocal either way, and that's what we'll find out over the next few days.
Scott McFarland, thank you. Good to see you.
Same.
We're going to take just a short break, but we will have more on this story at the top of the hour. I'm Lilia Luciano. You're streaming CBS News.
It's a history-making